All right, this is the March 18th Minnetrista City Council work session, and we will call the meeting to order. In attendance tonight is myself, Kathleen Refkin, acting mayor. Council members here tonight are Peter Vickery and Claudia Lacey. Mayor Whalen is not here, and Council member Ann McGregor is also not in attendance. We also have Director of Public Works, Gary Peters, Director of Administration, Allie Polfus, City Clerk, Ann Meyerhoff, City Administrator, Jasper Krugel, Director of Finance, Brian Graham, Community Development Director, David Abel, and Chief of Police, Paul Falls. Item number 1 is to call the meeting to order. Item number 2 is discussion of Maple Crest bond. Brian?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council. So I know this one came up, I think, towards the end of the year, and even for sure what in the last quarterly financial update in February, and staff was aware of this even at the end of during last year, even as far as just this Maple Crest bond, which was a project back in 2008, and I was actually here for that one very, very early in my career. So, and it's actually the 2014 A bond because it was refinanced in 2014. I think rates were pretty high in 2008 and then got better in 2014. So, but one of the things on that project, there was some large assessments due to, I think David remembers a little bit, a proposed development in Maple Crest that really didn't end up going through, but there was multiple lots platted and stuff or whatever. So ultimately that parcel paid off early, like in 2017, 2018, where it's a lot of assessment revenue that sort of went away or whatever, just because they obviously that was something that the property owner that then took it over, several years later decided to avoid some of that interest, or probably did some banking or financing on their own. So I guess the long story short, so the fund right now is at a small negative balance, and would project to have that happen for the next few years, just based on our maximum tax levy versus our principal and interest payments. Would probably be a $10,000-$15,000 gap. So if we just continued to pay it off, we just by the end of it, 2027, we'd have about $50,000, so, or $50,000 to $60,000 negative balance in the fund. But if we do have some funds available, whether it's road maintenance fund, is what staff's suggesting, to just pretty much pay it off with that. Basically $200,000 left in principal with just a tiny bit of interest. We'd save about $12,000-$13,000 in the interest, and then from there, the $35,000 a year we've been levying to pay this debt, fund, we could just put that right back into the road maintenance fund. So there would actually just be some additional revenue or available revenue to go in future years. So we checked with Ellers and Todd Hagen there, and usually we have after 8 years we can call the bonds or whatever. So we're past that with this being 2014. So we just have to notify the bond holders and I think do a resolution at one of our next council meetings that we want to pay it off, and then I think we'd be able to do that by this summer, May, June, and just pretty much have that off the books. And it's, I guess, one less debt fund out there, and then even just I think I mentioned in the memo, this one, seeing it was an older one, had a June-December payment schedule. All of our other ones are February, August. They just time better. We usually, get our tax payments at the end of the year and in the middle of the year. So it just works a little better because sometimes by June, this one's not that large a payment, but for some other ones, it can be a little bit more of we're waiting for our tax payments to come in, just a cash flow type item. So I don't know, does anyone have any questions? I think the mayor might have even been the one that sort of even brought this up a little too at one of the last meetings. So but yeah, I guess I'm open for discussion.
So would this would cut into the money that we have for the projects later on, like that we were talking about for 2026 and 27.
Well, ultimately there's going to need to be a funding source to pay this, and it's more of just a timing difference. We pay that off now, and then we'd actually have money to be able to levy. We'd have less debt levy to have to levy in 25, 6, and 7. So it would give us more flexibility in future years as far as how our, when we look at our overall budget and overall levy. So it's sort of it's a trade-off. We'd either need to do something in 2027 to make this fund whole, or do something now and then basically pay it back over a few years.
But this saves us $12,000 to $13,000.
It does right now. So yeah, that's the main benefit right off the bat. Yep.
And if I may, to answer Peter's question, we won't have to scale back any of the projects or anything because of this. There's adequate fund balance in the fund right now to pay this off right now, and then we'd build that back up. But generally, the money in the street maintenance fund goes towards like the maintenance pieces, like what we have tonight on the agenda for consideration. So we won't have to scale anything back. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, I guess I should have pointed out, in the funding at the bottom, that the balance is about 1.8 million in the fund right now. So it's got sufficient balance to be able to help this other fund out. And all the other debt funds have healthy balances and stuff. So this should be sort of a one-off or an anomaly as far as one that just basically with some of the interest rate ebbs and flows over the years. This one, and then what happened is we lowered the tax levy a little bit. We should have probably sooner levied, but ultimately it's, the residents got a little bit of a benefit for a little lower tax levy, and when ultimately it all comes out of the city taxes, whether it's a debt levy or whether it's a road maintenance levy or general fund levy. We've usually looked at the total levy, whether we're at that 6.5, 6 point whatever million now, and but each individual fund has to be looked at each year just because of fund accounting and stuff.
So if we're paying it off now, then we're continuing the levy, so taxpayers are paying a little bit more over the next couple of years that they wouldn't have had to if we just pay it off and reduce the levy. But you're saying to leave it at it where it is, and then it'll help build back the balance.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if we wanted to, we could just pay it off, and then, I know we pretty much look at the road maintenance fund as far as each year. Do we want to add 100, 125,000, 150,000? This 35,000 would just be something that'll be like available to almost help, be like a feeder money to help. Basically, we don't have to levy it here, so it's available over here. So.
It's not a big enough chunk that would cause us to reduce the road levy even more, basically.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's not a real material factor.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately.
Thank you.
So does that seem like something to?
Yeah. Oh, that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay.
Yeah, Claudia?
Yes, and we just let Ehlers know 30 days.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll follow up with Todd Hagen. I know we're even starting to look at with all these projects, or some of the other projects and water projects coming up that this was another item on the to discuss with Ehlers. So we'll follow up and bring that back to the council in the next meetings as far as just the logistics and coordination.
So we make the resolution at the next meeting? Is that?
I think so. Yeah, I think I wanted to get bring it to a work session first, and at least have a brief discussion, and then have that. We'll have the bond council and Ehlers work with you and Kenny to prepare that resolution to call these bonds.
Any other questions?
No.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. Next is public safety equipment requests and funding. Chief.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. So we've had a number of discussions leading up to tonight regarding the public safety funds, and that was not split evenly, but it was split between basically operations and CIP. So since we started talking about some of these funds, there's been a lot of question about what do we spend some of this money on. We're not certainly asking to spend all of it, but through a lot of the things we've been looking at as a result of that discussion, I have a couple of things that we can discuss tonight in kind of order of importance. So the first item, we've talked a little bit about license plate reading cameras, or LPRs. And a lot of this data is in your packet. So long story short, license plate reading cameras are technology that's been around for a long time. And it started out as devices that were attached to police cars themselves. And it's kind of in the last couple of years transitioned to more permanent locations to try and gather data. And so what they do is license plate reading cameras are installed generally on feeder streets so that you can gather data. Basically what the technology does is it will read license plates and then check it against the NCIC database, which is to make it I guess in a nutshell version of that is the database we use when we run a license plate. So that'll give us who the vehicle's registered to. It'll give us information about the registered owner, whether or not they have outstanding warrants or things like that. So kind of high-level stuff that is probably important to know for public safety reasons. So what these cameras do is they gather that data, and we can set this device up to give us direct notifications right to our squad phones. So for example, if a vehicle is listed in NCIC database as stolen, we'll get a hit and our staff will get that notification right away so that they can go and deal with that. It'll also do things like Amber Alerts, registered warrants if people are wanted people for certain things. And we have a lot of input as to what the alerts look like. So obviously we'd want to be alerted to Amber Alerts, things of that very high level nature. You can dial this all the way down to people with suspended driver's licenses if you'd like to. Certainly there's an interest in not having people driving on the road that don't have valid driver's license or don't have insurance or have serious warrants for their arrest for various reasons. So this technology, like I said, has been around for years. In the metro area, there are dozens and dozens of police departments that already have this in place. What I can tell you is that in the lake area, we are the only agency that does not have these in place. So Deep Haven and South Lake have them. Wayzata, Long Lake, Orono, West Hennepin also have them. So we're kind of the last piece of the lake area corridor that does not have these in place. And so if our intention, if these cameras are approved, would be to put 2 of them along County Road 92 and 2 of them along Highway 7. So that entire lake area corridor would be covered by this technology. They are directional, so unfortunately you can't just put one camera. They're directional, so you have to put one facing north and one south on 92 and the same on 7 east and west. I think,
Chief, can I ask you a question?
yes,
So you're thinking like at the major intersection at 7 and 44, or where did you say?
well, I'll get to that. So
I guess, do you have to stop to read it, or can it
No.
read it going?
No,
50
traffic
miles an hour.
it doesn't affect traffic at all. So these are just mounted on poles, and it just reads the information. So traffic, unless they see the camera, won't even know that it's happening. So it doesn't affect traffic at all. Unfortunately, MnDOT does not allow you to put these devices on any of their infrastructure. That's something that this Flock Safety is a company that provides these. They're working with MnDOT, but obviously MnDOT's a very large organization, lots of layers for approval processes and things like that. So they're not there yet with Hennepin County. The county will allow them to put poles in the county right away, and that's new. Both Orono and West Hennepin have had these for some time, but they were kind of in the beginning stages. So my approach was, let's let them work the bugs out, because there were a lot of them in the very beginning. And now we're to the point where those things have all been resolved. Fortunately for us, the city owns the light poles at 7 and Kings Point Road. So that's a free pole to put these devices on. We don't have to purchase anything. They could just be installed at that location. And that's a very good location. You'll still get eastbound and westbound with enough time if you get an alert for our staff to respond. That doesn't mean we're going to get them 100% of the time, but if we have them and South Lake has them, somebody's going to get them. So, and be able to investigate whatever the alert is. So, with that said, I think a lot of the bugs have been worked out. I think in addition to the alerts, and this information is in your packet as well. So certainly if I'm talking too fast or you have questions, feel free to interrupt at any point. But from an investigative standpoint, these are a really tremendous investigative tool because it allows staff to look back. If we have a burglary, for example, and we can find from a Ring camera that it's a red truck, but we don't have a license plate, we can go back to the LPR cameras in the area or on the route that we think they likely would have had to take to get into that location. And we can go back and narrow down that data and investigate that way. And if there's only 5 red trucks, well, we get license plates on each one of them. That's not that much follow-up. And we have a potential suspect or a link to a suspect. So investigatively speaking, this is a tremendous tool.
So it records all of us then, is that, so if
All
we're
of
just driving to and from the grocery store or something, how long does it keep that data? And are there any privacy protections for
Yes.
innocent people?
That is a great question. So, the bottom line is, it does read all of the plates in that area as long as the angle is correct. So all of the plates that go by that reader will be read. So this system is set up on an encrypted system. So this isn't just some fly by the seat of their pants type of business that has their own server. There's all kinds of criteria in place, and it's all encrypted data. So what that means, it's stored at the highest level of security. Encryption, there isn't a higher level of security than an encrypted data. Encrypted is the highest security level available. So, and this system is designed to if there's no flags or investigative inquiries, it just records over itself in 30 days. So it's only stored for 30 days and then it just records over itself. So the vast majority of data that is collected is just deleted after 30 days.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And what's been the results in Bond Lake and Orono? Have they been successful in catching like any of the break-ins or people with criminal records?
Yes, absolutely. Most notably for burglaries or those types of crimes, they were able to narrow down, not in every case, of course, depending on the location of the crime and the location of the camera. That's why we chose to put them on major routes. And we all kind of have the same thought process. So this way, the whole entire corridor, Lake area corridor, will be covered by these devices. And so I don't know, I can try and see if there are some public links that I can send to you, because this is a national company, so there are all kinds of success stories, not just in Minnesota, but around the country, of how these cameras solved crimes, many of them very serious crimes. I think there's a couple stories of Amber Alerts that these devices hit on, and as a result, one of them I know was not in this state, was a child was in the car. It was a stolen vehicle. I think the suspect probably didn't know there was a child in the car, and the car was abandoned in a fairly remote location. Well, had they not had the camera hit on that, they likely would have never looked there for the car, and the child likely would have not survived because time obviously would have been of the essence there. So, but there's all kinds of stories like that as a result of these type of devices.
Where,
No.
where on 92 would you put them?
So 92, we would be able to put up. They make poles specifically for these, so we would have to purchase, and that information is in your packet as well. And we can get to the price when we get to that part. Likely, we put one kind of far north, on the north end, likely 26 West area. If we put it further north than that, there's too many points where they can turn off. So we'd like to get them into that corridor before we put the camera, because then we know once we get a hit, we've got a lot of time to catch them. And then probably on the other end, the south end, that one would face north. And then 7, they'd be at that Kings Point roundabout in that vicinity, one facing east, one facing west, just because the city owns the poles there.
So how many cameras would the
So it'd be
city-
4 cameras total. And the cost,
Is that
printing is
13?
really small, and I didn't bring my glasses.
Is that
It's just over $13,000
for 4?
for 4 cameras. Flock Safety owns the cameras. The beauty of that is they do all the installation, all the maintenance. We don't have to do any of that. So it's not just another electronic device that we're responsible for cleaning, maintaining, updating, things like that. That's just all part of this price. The downside is there is an ongoing annual cost to operate these. I should get into one of the best parts of this is not only can we see our cameras, but we can share these cameras with Orono, for example, and they can share theirs with ours. So now we become part of this whole lake area system, even though we're going to hopefully rent or purchase 4 of these cameras. We would be able to see all of the cameras because now we're part of that system. And these cameras aren't just in the public sector, they're also in the private sector. So, for example, if you had an agency or a business or even HOAs, some HOAs use these cameras. You could, if they give you permission, you'd be able to see those as well. Certainly, we would not give a private organization access to ours, but it can go the other way. So we would be able to, from an investigative standpoint, that's a pretty nice tool to have. I can think of a couple recent incidents we've had where we've tried to work with people on their Ring cameras and things like that. Those are beautiful if the crime is occurring right in front of their house. But, you know, unfortunately, a lot of these things happen in the back, and very few people have Ring cameras in the back, so it hasn't been very successful.
So these cameras can catch the license plate even if it's zooming through the
Think of
intersection.
it like an iPass reader when you're going through
Really?
Chicago.
Wow.
Right. Your license plate has, there's barcodes on them, so it reads it. It's not just taking a digital photo of the number. It just has the technology to be able to read the plate because there's some reflective barcodes in there.
Does it do it at a pretty high percent? Like, does it hit like 90, 100%?
Very high percent,
Okay.
yes. I mean, obviously, when they install them, they'll be out there getting the angles just right, testing them. And then they do routine maintenance because the cameras obviously need to be cleaned once in a while and things like that. But
I just have one more question.
yes,
So if someone damages the camera,
Mhm.
does Flock replace it, or do
Yes.
we?
No, they replace it. That's part of the agreement because they technically own this stuff. We own the data, they own the device itself.
Is that part of like the $12,000 annual cost, or is that more for the?
Yes, that's kind of, you know, anytime you have electronic devices, there's operational licenses. In the very beginning, when some of the Lake area agencies started, one got the devices and then others added to it. And they were kind of operating under one license, which isn't allowed. The BCA obviously caught on to that and said, wait a minute, that's not how this works. You all have to do that because then everybody's accountable for their own devices.
How much has the annual cost increased over time? Is it pretty stable, or is it?
It is pretty stable. This flock safety is relatively new to Minnesota, although they've got dozens of agencies around the state, and they're growing very quickly. But it's my understanding that the price has not increased much at all. I don't have exact numbers for you, but these are the same numbers that I've been talking about with this company for well over a year.
Is that pretty incremental? So if you ever added 4 cameras versus 6 cameras versus 2 cameras, is that 12,000 pretty? Is that more for licenses, or is it per camera, or?
That's more for the device and the licenses, yes.
Okay.
So the difference between what we would pay initially and that ongoing 12,000 is there's a couple of poles that we would have to purchase to put the devices on along the county road because there just isn't really a good location there. We talked about some of our outdoor warning sirens, but they're not really in the locations where we would want them, or they're too far off the road because the angle is too great to capture and place most of the license plates.
So the reoccurring cost after the initial install is the 12,000.
Yes.
Brian, that doesn't seem real material for.
Not too bad, and we've sort of probably be similar to like in the CIP, we went to the different model of on the radios and stuff. We
Yeah.
probably would have an annual cost, you know, for that. Have to build that in, you know, as a basically each year into our CIP fund or equipment fund or whatever. So
Right. I guess the way I look at this, and a lot of departments look at this, is it's just this technology is allowing us to do business in a much more efficient manner rather than going out and making 5 million traffic stops, hoping you find the one with the warrant or whatever. You get these alerts and it's just very efficient. So you're kind of getting the high level stuff right out of the way. That way you can have resources where you need them when you need them, because that's a really difficult thing to judge without that type of data. Mm-hmm. So I know there are people that are concerned about, you know, their privacy and things like that. And my answer to that is I completely understand that. I mean, I drive around in my own personal vehicle as well. And I think that the bottom line is there's all kinds of statistical data attached to this that shows that crime levels go down drastically in areas that have these types of cameras.
Is that because the constituents know that there's cameras there?
Right, I think they're fairly new, but criminals, it was just like tasers in the beginning, they had no idea what they were. Once people figured out what that is, they were much more compliant. This same thing. Criminals don't like to be on camera, they want to go burglarize someplace where they feel like nobody knows they're there. So that statistically is just going to do I think from the deterrent factor alone is huge. And these will be highly visible, so.
Do our neighboring, I know I'm constantly asking these questions, sorry. Do our neighboring cities also have them?
They do. So let me see if I can find. So lake area agencies, it's kind of done two ways, but so Wayzata Police Department, obviously they have some in Wayzata. They also, Wayzata covers Long Lake. Long Lake also has some of these cameras. Orono has them along Highway 12. I think there's some on Shoreline as well. West Hennepin has them on Highway 12. I just learned today that Deep Haven PD has them. I don't know where those are located. And then South Lake has several of these cameras as well. So, and like I said, we've been talking about this as police chiefs for quite some time. And my thought was, I heard a lot of the issues they had initially, and it just made more sense to let them get the bugs worked out for a period of time. And so I think they've gotten there, and this company has developed relationships with Hennepin County, and they're working on MnDOT, so it's just getting better all the time.
So it has no traffic control functions like catching speeders and things like that?
No. This is, you probably heard of the traffic ticket cameras, those types of things, and those have been challenged, and whether or not they're constitutional or not. And that's all still kind of working its way through. It really depends on whether you can identify the driver. It's not just, I have vehicle A and it's registered to you, so you get the ticket. Well, you have to identify who the driver is in order to successfully make that happen. But these don't have any enforcement ability at all. They're just capturing data that we can use and really sifting out the vast majority of people. This isn't going to affect them in any way at all. It's really the people with warrants or Amber Alerts or stolen vehicles, things like that. And if officers, they make traffic stops. Obviously, every single one of them is for a legitimate reason, and they're obviously trying to make the roads safer. This way, they know who doesn't have a driver's license. They can stop them. If it turns out not to be the registered owner, they just let them go. But there's all kinds of things they can do with directed patrols here that just makes it so much more efficient than the way they do it now. And it would be in addition to what we're doing now. So,
Does it just pop up in your patrol car, or is it on a computer back at the station?
we would set it up so that the alerts go to the squad phones, the cell phones, because it uses cellular transmission.
And we have all the necessary technology to make that work on our end?
Yes. Yep. And the flock safety is, they've been really good at implementing this system for the other agencies. So they would come out, install all the devices, and then they would put the app on our phones and then test it and verify it, train everybody. That's all included in this.
So if it gets approved, how long does it take to get them and get it up and running?
That's a good question. They couldn't give me a concrete answer, but the turnaround time is pretty quick. I would imagine 7 will go quick because the city owns the poles, so that piece is good. I don't know what the installation time is for these poles that they put along the county road. It's not like a telephone pole. It's not going to be something that enormous, so I would think those would go pretty quick too. But we didn't. They weren't interested in getting too far into the weeds until we had a discussion to see if we were even interested or if it was a possibility for us. So that's kind of our first step tonight.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, given at 30 square miles. I get the idea of the efficiency. That's a good idea.
Yeah, one of our biggest challenges is all our development is on the south end, the majority of it, and then on the north end. So it takes an enormous amount of time to get from one to the other.
Yeah.
And if you have calls where you need 2 or 3 people, all of your staff end up south or north, and then it takes a long time to get back. So anything we can do to try and make things a little more efficient, I think is a step in the right direction.
Well, I think safety's our community's one of our top concerns. So, and our policemen don't ask for very much. So I totally support this if you think you need it.
Absolutely. I think this is great technology, and I think it would benefit our residents tremendously, especially as we continue to grow and crime rates are just inevitably going up everywhere. Fortunately, ours is low, but we'd like to do what we can to keep it there. So I think this is a step in the right direction to help us. Just another tool to make that happen.
Great.
Does it come back then on a resolution, or does he just go forward with it?
It'll come back once we get some hard line numbers and maybe a little more information, but it'll be probably on April 1st or April 15th.
Thanks.
It says equipment requests, is there more than one, or is it just for the 4 cameras at once?
Well, I don't know.
That's one of them. I feel like I'm asking for too much here. So as we're talking about public safety money, there's just a number of things that obviously over the years we've done the best we can with what we have. One area that we know that we need to probably make some improvements in is our patrol rifles. For years we have assigned them to cars. So we have 8 marked cars. 2 of those belong to the CSO, so they do not have rifles in them. I think we currently have 11 patrol rifles. So all of our patrol cars have them. Mine has one, the lieutenant, the investigator, and the school resource officer, and also the drug task force officer has one. The challenge is starting to become that we're getting big enough with enough staff where it's really hard for one firearms instructor to go and qualify or sight in all of these rifles. Our officers assigned to the SWAT team don't have rifles assigned to them. Orono and West Hennepin and South Lake assign rifles to staff, so they just take their rifle to their training, whether it's SWAT or whatever it is. Ours have to take them out of cars because they don't have their own. So it's just kind of getting to the point where we probably need to do things a little more efficiently than we have been. In order to make that happen, to do it the way everyone else is doing it, we'd need to add 4 patrol rifles. And so the beauty of that is everyone gets assigned a rifle. They're going to last longer because it's just one person carrying and using that rifle instead of multiple people. They're not coming in and out of cars all the time or getting banged around. The SWAT guys assigned to the SWAT team would have their own rifles. For the most part, the rifles are set up identically. They're all the same make, style, things like that. But they would be able to customize little things like grips to meet their needs. Everybody's not the same size, things like that. Customize it, which I think is really important when you get into SWAT applications. And so that's something we've been talking about, again, for a lot longer than we've known about public safety money. So the ask here is that we would be able to add 4 more rifles. That would allow us to assign rifles to staff rather than to cars. And to be able to have our SWAT guys have a rifle they can use for that as well. So that, when we look at the rifles we have now are relatively new, which is a good thing. So we would match what we currently have. And to get us, so there's the rifle, there's the suppressor that's on the rifle, and some other items like red dot sights, lights, things like that. So the rifles themselves are fairly expensive. So the total of 4 new rifles, fully equipped with all of the goodies, without going too far in the weeds, is just over $9,500 for 4 new rifles. I know that's a big number, but I guess I'll just throw it out there. Yeah, unfortunately, nothing is cheap.
I think the timing's at least good that we did get the public safety money at the end of December. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be as supportive of it. No, I'm always supportive of this call, but no. I would probably be asking more questions, I guess, or no, I don't know. But I know he researches what he needs and stuff, and he's efficient and from working with him over the years, and he's not going to go top, or he's not going to go overboard or whatever. So I know if he's asking for it, he needs it. So.
I think the rifles that we already have, we traded in our old rifles, so we got credit for each of those, which was a nice thing because it kept that cost down fairly low to swap them out. Adding the suppressors is something we did as part of that process. It's very useful when you, obviously if you shoot a 223 rifle, you'll know that they are very, very loud. At the range, we use hearing protection. If an officer had to fire that without hearing protection, your hearing's pretty much gone. So most departments have gone to suppressors, and we followed suit because it just makes sense. If you take that weapon inside, we shoot outside with those. I can't imagine how loud that would be. So another reason we went to that. We also shortened them so they're a little bit more user-friendly and tighter quarters, things like that. So the good news is we've already updated all of our rifles for a really good price in the last couple of years. These would just match those. So it would be the newest technology, and we'd be good. I don't think we'd have to replace rifles for many, many years if we were to do this.
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, how long?
Their life expectancy with your service.
Yes.
And typically, I mean, we're asking kind of, I guess, Q1 basically yet. If they weren't to be approved, we would build them into the budget. Typically, they're just built into the budget. You know, like when we replaced the rifles this last time around, they're just built into the budget. We didn't really know about this until basically after the budget was already approved. So otherwise, we would have likely just built it into this budget and allocated some CIP funds towards it.
Right. It sounds like they last many years.
Yes, they do. And if you assign them to officers, the lifespan would last even longer because you just use your rifle at the shoot instead of bringing out 4 or 6 rifles and having everyone use those. So rounds per rifle actually goes down and they last longer. Exactly. So what I've been doing for years is we just add $2,000 or $3,000 to our CIP per year, and that would work towards maintenance, or if we had to replace one here or one there. That's kind of how we did it in the past. And that works great if you have just a handful of employees. As you tend to get bigger, that's much harder to do.
So as we continue to grow and add officers, we would build into the budget the ability to buy them a new one then?
Yes.
Is that the plan?
That is the plan, yes. Yes.
And budget-wise, that works with, we have enough for the.
Yeah, we probably, and ultimately what we'll do is, depending on what council, all wants to do, is we could bring this back as a budget amendment, but it would come out of the fund balance, basically from that public safety money, that $176,000 we put into the fund. I know it was more of a discussion right at the end of last year. I know as far as, I remember even Councilmember McGregor saying, well, Paul, what do you want to spend this on? I think now Paul's saying what he wants to spend it. I think maybe once you had time, you guys had time to ponder and stuff, and even some of these things even came up as far as, where, like Jasper said, should it have been in the 24 budget, or is there more analysis that needed to be done or further information? I think some of that now is.
When we first started talking about the public safety money, there was a lot of questions, I think, from some of the council members about, well, what would you like to use this for? And that's a hard question to answer until you start digging into, well, what do we need? This isn't about adding luxury items. This is about what do we really need. And just the way I am, I had my staff go and you can't just say, hey, I need it. Well, show me why you need it. And so we had a lot of discussions about what is it that we need and why do we need it and how are we doing things? Is it working? Is it not working? We're really good at making things work when that's all we have and there is no other answer. So that's kind of how we arrived at this. But going forward to budget for one of these rifles, the rifle itself is about $1,400. Sights are another $500. Another light is $250. So that's a really easy thing to budget in, kind of like we've been doing, where you put in $2,000 or $3,000 into the CIP, and then you know that if you add an officer, then you have the money already budgeted towards that.
I'm good with that.
So, yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
What's the soonest we could get him his rifles? Like, what's the soonest we could? It seems like you need this.
Well, we do. I mean, certainly what we're doing, we've made it work. So we have rifles. We're not without that. It's just a lot of moving things around to get them where they need to be rather than assigning them to people. So what we would do is probably similarly to the cameras, we'd bring this back. I assume we'd have to bring this back for a resolution.
Yeah, I think we just bring it back as a package of amend the budget to include these things, and then
Okay.
basically have a good dollar amounts. We should have more hard numbers on the quote, right? For the
Right,
the
we can get the
cameras as
quotes
well as
updated.
the rifles, and then just have that for the council to approve. That probably one of the next couple meetings or whatever would be my
Okay.
thought. Right?
Okay.
How long does it take to get the rifles? Are they Like, is it quick, I don't know, months, weeks, days?
Kind of depends. It can take a while. It probably take a couple of months because they build these to our specs. So, you can get a generic rifle, but then they have to put the stock we use on it and the sights we choose on it, the right suppressor. There's lots of different versions of all these things. But we wanted to build it just like the ones that we have already.
But I think if you're able to tell staff they're coming in a couple months,
Absolutely.
that'll be a win, right? Or
Right.
everyone will have their
Right.
own versus.
And
sharing
I think
one spot.
it's gotten better. The turnaround time on these things has gotten a little bit better. COVID kind of set everything back, but everyone seems to be coming out of that, with the exception of the vehicles. So I think we can turn that around fairly quick.
Great.
And then lastly, this is not really an ask.
Keep going. Just bring it.
We got a couple more hours, right? All right. So I'm almost starting to feel strange asking for all of this.
We just do it all at once instead of at every meeting.
Just rip that
There's
Band-Aid
been a lot
off.
of talk about firearms tonight. One of the other options that has been brought up many times over the years is red dot sights. We use them on our rifles currently. And in the last, few years, that technology has advanced quite a bit to fit handguns. And so I've had several of our staff say that, they know a lot of people that are in departments that have utilized these, have gone to red dot sights. So it's really the same technology, but on a handgun. They're fairly expensive, but really what it does in the long run is it brings the liability down because it's a lot easier to put a dot on something and that's where the bullet goes versus relying on just regular sights, which is what you're dealing with a handgun. A little bit different animal. Handguns are for short distance type of situations, which is the majority of what we would deal with. But this technology has gotten so much better in the last couple of years. We carry Glock handguns. They're very, very durable. They're very, very easy to train people on. I was a firearms instructor for 12 years, and I can tell you it's my favorite gun if I have to train somebody on it, because I can train anybody on a handgun, on a Glock handgun. The beauty of it is Glock has now made a new version that has a plate on the top slide, which allows you to install the red dot sights. So it's not something, in the past you'd have to have a gunsmith drill holes and hope it all lines up, and just not a very efficient way to do it. And I would never want to use something that's not proven to exact specs. And so that technology is here, and a lot of departments have transitioned over to these for those very reasons. Anything you can do to take some of the liability away from what your officers are dealing with is really, really important. Obviously, we train a lot for accuracy and things like that, but you always worry about, you're responsible for every bullet that leaves that gun, whether it's, if you hit the suspect, but what's behind the suspect, things like that. So this just helps enhance that ability for everybody. And a lot of our cops are really good shots, but let's be honest, not everybody's at the same level. Not everyone ever will be at the same level because some people just inherently are good with guns and some are not. And so from a training standpoint, this is, in my opinion, vitally important to getting everybody on as close to on the same page as you possibly can. With that said, I just want to say that everybody has to meet minimum standards, and everybody does. If they don't carry a gun, and they can't work patrol, obviously, if you can't carry a gun. So everyone's meeting those standards. And we're pretty fortunate here. I hear a lot of stories from other agencies where they, especially the large ones, where you have some people that it takes them a lot more work to get to that same point. And so I think that's a lot of how this technology came about. With a rifle, it makes absolute sense because you're talking about very long distances. But even a handgun, in the stress of everything, it's really nice to be able to put a dot on something and know that that's what you're going to get. So we're still in the research process for this because unfortunately it's not just we want this gun with this sight. They make different versions of the gun and different versions of the sight. So we're working with the Glock rep and the different red dot sight reps to go out and do some demos and see which one is best for law enforcement. Some of them are more durable, some of them are bigger, some are smaller, things like that. So we're still in that research phase of this process. But certainly when we get to the point where we kind of narrow down which one fits us and which one would fit the profession the best, then we would bring that back and have a better idea of what we're looking at for costs. The good news is, again, with Glock over the years, in my time, we've traded in old guns for new guns. So that difference, we usually get about $250 to $300 trade allowance per gun. So that cost wouldn't be too outrageous. But at this point, I don't have numbers because we're still in that research phase. But I do think that these are really important, and going forward, I think it's something that would serve all of us much better than what we're doing now. And I think that's why so many agencies are going to them. And that is really all I have.
Okay.
So you're just looking more council supportive of even you're going with that doing that research and bringing it back, right?
Yeah, and I think that obviously there's going to be a price attached to that. I at this point, my estimate would be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. I don't know exactly. Depends what we get on trade, and then which site. The sites vary pretty dramatically in price, so it's really hard to throw a number out there at this point. But it's great technology, and once we narrow down what we would like, I can bring that back and we can have another discussion.
That sounds
Sounds
good.
good.
Okay.
Any other questions for Paul?
No.
All right, next we have temporary greenhouse discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. So with the recent opening of the McIntoons grocery store, we did receive an inquiry from it's Unitide's vegetable farm. They would like to install a temporary greenhouse in the parking lot of McIntoons grocery store. They do have one that they do every year in Waconia, and what they're looking to do is mimic that same footprint here in Minnetrista. What they do in Waconia, they have it's a 60-foot long, 21 foot wide, and 11 foot in height is the size that they'd be looking to install here. Ideally, they'd have it up and running May 1st, and usually they go in Waconia to sometime in the end of June. They list June 23rd as likely the end date. I think that kind of depends on how much they sell and those sorts of things. Hours of operation, they're looking at 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. In terms of the hours that they'd be open to do this. As stated in the memo, this is the first time something like this has popped up here, obviously. This is our first grocery store. Our code is not specific to temporary structures like this or temporary tents. So we wanted to make sure we touched base with council to see what direction you wanted us to go with this. We did reach out to a number of neighboring communities. If you go to Unitide's, if you look at their website, they've got dozens of them all over the metro, mostly West Metro, but they have a lot of these. So we did contact some of the communities where they already operate. And there is a very wide range of ways that communities will process these types of requests. Some do just an over-the-counter temporary structure, just so we know who's there, how long you're going to be there. We've got contact information. And then the most extreme situation that we did see was going as far as issuing an interim use permit, where you do a land use application, you do a public hearing notice. To everyone within, for an IUP, it'd be 500 feet notice to all properties. Where you'd hold a public hearing with the planning commission, make a recommendation, and then bring that to city council. There'd be conditions that would be attached with that IUP as well. And so those are the levels, if you will, or that we saw on the spectrum. Some communities we had, the ones that we got this information from, we said, well, have you had any issues? And most said no, we don't. We don't get much complaints, but there were some, and I've personally been involved in one in a previous community where there were concerns, complaints, and it did require some staff time to go out there and count the parking spots, and garbage would be flying around, and signage was an issue and a concern, and sometimes they try, if something, they grow bigger than what they tell you they're going to, and A lot of times there's seasonal part-time employees who aren't as keen on picking up garbage, and the beer flats that you put the flowers in will be blowing around, and those sorts of things. So those are the kind of things that you hear sometimes with complaints. But like I said, there's plenty of communities, but Waconia is one specifically that you said we've never had anybody complain or say anything about it. So I think it all depends. I think it probably could work great, and if garbage is flying around all the time, and it does anyway. Yeah. does anyway, right? Exactly. So you just never know exactly how it would go. But just again, wanted to touch base as to how you'd like us to proceed. If certainly if we want to do something more on the IUP end, it would take some work on our end in terms of doing a city code text amendment to add something to our code for that process. But otherwise, if you're fine with it and what kind of a wait and see approach, we can go ahead and let them do what they need to do under what kind of the guidelines we have here and go from there. So again, just wanted to touch base and make sure, see what direction council wanted us to go with this.
I don't think we need to make more work into IUPs. I don't think we need to unless it becomes an issue, but I'm fine with you guys just knowing that they're going up and monitoring it for if it becomes an issue.
How does that work with McIntoons? I mean, are they on
Did they police
board
it?
on this? Or
They're completely on board. This vegetable farm provides a majority of the produce for the grocery store.
Oh,
So they have a very, very good, close working relationship. And so some of these vegetable farm or stands that they do in other metro, they'll have the flower greenhouse portion, but they also then have a vegetable stand outside. With McIntoons, they're not going to do that because their produce is already in the store. So they're just going to do the flowers in this case. But they're completely on board. We've talked to the McIntoons as well, and they said no, absolutely. They didn't even think they needed to ask us, basically. But yeah, they're completely on board with it.
And if we don't do a formal process, what do we do if we have the problems that you mentioned that you had seen?
We then would need to amend the city code to come up with a process and/or conditions, if you will, to based on concerns we're hearing and those sorts of things.
but wouldn't McIntoons address it first? Wouldn't you think?
The one in Waconia, I go to it in the summer. It's very nice. It's very neat. It's very well run. The people that work there are very polite. It's definitely like a family business. They have gorgeous flowers. I've never seen trash around it in 6 years. I mean, it's very well kept.
I would think the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing, and again, we're so early in the opening of the grocery store to understand the parking demands. I mean, that's the other issue that can come up is they're going to take up anywhere from 24 to 36 parking stalls.
Do they plan on doing it like in the back then, closer to like the like back on the back side by the apartment?
It'd be that
there?
front corner.
That front corner up.
Yeah. So that's the only other issue that can come up. The good news is it's May through June. There's no real big, huge holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, where you have high demand parking then. And again, we just don't know how full. The other problem right now is you've got the construction of the apartment, and they're using some of that, which that'll go away, eventually. So that's the only other thing that kind of sometimes comes up. But again, we just don't know yet how that's going to work.
Well,
I think Mayor and Council, I think there's also been a request by a company that wants to sell fireworks during that couple of weeks prior to 4th of July in the same parking lot. Obviously, I think it would be after this would close and then this other thing would open up for a couple of weeks. And we're just in the process of taking a look at that permit. We've never done one for sale, fireworks for sale type of permit. We've done it for private use, things like that. So I've reached out to the fire department, and they're going to check with other cities, specifically Waconia, because this exact same thing occurs there. I don't personally see any huge issues with it, but it's a very similar thing to this.
Yeah.
Probably a little shorter term, but we're just looking at that now. So Just thought I'd let you know that that's coming as well.
Which there again, I mean, I didn't know they were going to do a tent. I'd heard about this, but similar. I mean, so I didn't know they were doing a tent. So again, I guess to think about that, that's the exact same thing they'd be doing, a tent like that, and just to make sure too. I guess if you're fine with that, which is completely fine. Just want to make sure we're going in that right direction. So.
You guys okay with staff just basically issuing, so you just issue a permit saying it's okay for this period of time and then?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. We just kind of right now we don't have anything in our fee schedule, so we just generically come up with some information in a form and just so we can document it. And then next go around with our fee schedule, we adopt some, add a line for temporary structure tent, if you will, and just more of a formal process. So.
And the fireworks piece would have like an inspection piece from the fire department as part of that process.
And so we'd collect a fee to cover that.
To cover that cost, whatever that is.
The fireworks one, we do have an empty schedule, which is strange.
Yeah, we do, because there are just a handful of residents that pay companies to come out and do large firework exhibits at that time of year. So this one's a little bit different,
I
but
think we have a separate one.
do we?
I think so. 99% sure.
Okay, well, we very well might. And, we've just never done one for selling fireworks. So if we already have it, that's great. I don't know. Yeah.
Would they provide a bond in case they damage the parking lot or there was some kind of?
Well, the parking lot's Megan's, right? So if they damage it, they got to deal with Megan's hands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The current fireworks permits do require some liability insurance on behalf of whoever's hosting this event, or in this case, the sales. So the fire department's going to research this, because I'm sure there are some processes through the state fire marshal's office and otherwise that Waconia and others that do this would be familiar with. And then we'll probably adopt that type of inspection process.
And I can confirm we do have a separate line item for sales too.
Did not know that.
Learned something new today.
And the inspection. I learned that.
All right. Claudia, any comments? Or?
No, thank you.
All right. Good with that?
I'm good with it.
All right, we're good with you just issuing a
Okay.
permit and then
Yes.
bringing it back for a fee schedule next year.
Sounds good.
All right. Anything else? Any other discussion? All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn the work session?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Motion passes 3-0. Work session is adjourned.